Classrooms Reimagined by a Young Innovator is a powerful reminder that age is no barrier when it comes to creating impact. At just 18, he is a coder, an educator, and a change maker who is transforming the learning experience through technology and innovation. Please join me in welcoming Aaryaman Maheshwari. This session will be moderated by Ms. Rifa Chabra. Rifa, kindly get on stage and let's get the conversation rolling with Aaryaman. A round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. Come on, this one is going to be super interesting. I want all of you to be super active and energetic. Rifa, over to you.
Hello and a very warm welcome to ABP Desam Smart Ed Conclave. And today I have with me a whiz kid. A lot of you must not even have thought of such great things to do at the age of 18. And he is building the future of thousands of other kids along with his own future. Now, he is also transforming computer education across government schools in Telangana with something that is called teaching cooking metaphors. So can you tell us what these cooking metaphors are? Because it's something I'm hearing for the first time.
Absolutely. So thank you so much, ABP Desam, for inviting me to this conclave. I think events like this are super important to kind of shape the future of quite arguably the most important industry that we have right now. So Smart Bharat, the concept behind Smart Bharat is essentially there's a lot of infrastructure that exists inside government schools in Telangana, and to be honest, all across India as a result of corporate CSR initiatives or even the government's own initiatives. The problem is that despite this pristine infrastructure that exists in these schools, and to be very honest, like until 2 or 3 years ago, even my own school didn't have this kind of quality of infrastructure. There's no soft support that's installed within these schools after the infrastructure is set up to actually teach the students how they can exploit the, or I guess exploit isn't the right word, but indulge in the facilities that are set up for them. And this comes with like pretty good internet, quite a lot of the times, projectors, computers, etc. But there's no teachers, right? So the
currently you're involved with about 21 government schools,
correct,
right?
Yeah.
So do you plan on expanding that elsewhere other than Telangana?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So primarily right now we're actually working with Telangana model schools to set it up in these 21 schools that you've mentioned. But we also have a lot of NGO partners who work pan-India. So I hope to expand to Andhra, Karnataka, Mumbai, potentially even Delhi as well in coming months. But the concept behind Smart Bharat is essentially how can you kind of plug into this existing infrastructure to address this huge gap that exists of the lack of computer teachers.
Right. So I was also going to come to that. We live in a country where there's definitely a huge infrastructure gap, right? Connectivity, internet is not penetrated everywhere. Am I right? So these government schools that you're working with, how are you, trying to ensure, how are you bridging this education gap?
Right. So actually, like I mentioned, and contrary to popular belief, the penetration that exists for internet and these computer facilities is actually very high in a lot of these government schools because of the corporate CSR initiatives and whatnot. So what we're trying to do is plug into that existing infrastructure by creating educational content and then dubbing it to the local language. So the reason that there's no soft support that exists in these schools despite all of this infrastructure is I identify 3 key pillars. One is budget constraints. So if you look up like the average cost of a computer educator salary per year in a government school, it comes to like, I don't know, 13-14 INR a month, 13-14,000 INR a month. And if you scale that to the 1.1 million government and government aided schools that exist across the country, the number comes up to some like absolutely absurd $2.4 billion a year just to install a single computer teacher in every single school, assuming that many teachers even exist, right? So budget is absolutely a huge issue. The second pillar is availability, right? Computer education as a subject is still very privileged, quote unquote privileged, right? As unfortunate as it is. So this $2.4 billion statistic is assuming that many educators even exist in the first place, right? And the third key issue is language, because the problem is that these students are so linguistically underserved that the majority of them only understand their local language, which is, for example, in Telangana,
Hence
Telugu.
the use of the metaphors that
Yeah, the metaphors and the dubbing, which I'll come to in a second. So essentially, these three pillars is what we try to address, and the way that we do that is by creating a ton of educational content in house, teaching computer education through these very dynamic interactive videos that use a lot of cooking metaphors. And after that, we dub all of this content using artificial intelligence, using speech AI, to the local language that the students are most comfortable with. And then alongside our NGO partners and the government, we kind of deploy that in the schools.
Just out of curiosity, is AI able to do that well?
Yeah, that's a really good question actually. So speech AI, I guess I'll give you a bit of my background as to like why what landed me this, into this space. So I'm someone that's been fortunate to have a very a ton of early exposure, right, from a very young age. I was born and brought up in the US, and I moved to India, I think when I was 8 or 9 years old. And there was this very stark difference that I saw in educational attitudes when I moved from the US to India. In the US, I had a ton of early exposure. I had a lot of encouragement from my academic environment to pursue the most random of things. Right, like I would create websites. One story that I really like to tell is that I set up this sandwich restaurant on Uber Eats, which is like the Zomato alternative of the US when I was a kid. So I had a lot of opportunity.
How old were you?
7, I think. I was 7 years old.
Already cooking stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, hence the cooking metaphors. But yeah, so as a result of that, I had all of this early exposure, and then I very firmly believe that early exposure is what kind of shaped who I am today, right, and all of the skills that I've acquired to be able to do initiatives like Smart Bharat. But then when I moved to India in I think the 4th or 5th grade, there was this huge stark difference in educational attitudes. I have thus far experienced I think 4 curricula, and yeah, I mean it's really quite shocking, right?
So but you're sure it's changing now, right?
Exactly, yeah.
Okay. And other than Smart Bharat, what other initiatives are you currently involved with?
Right. So one of my key initiatives is something called Builder Group, which I started when I was in I think the 8th or 9th grade. And that was actually a result of the stark educational shift that I saw. I saw so much young, ambitious, driven talent that just didn't have the right enablement to pursue whatever they were interested in. As a result of which I founded Builder Group, which is currently a 6,000 strong community of young technologists and innovators, spans over 100 countries. And I've seen such incredible success stories come out of Builder Group just by kind of accommodating for the deficits of the traditional education system. Like one story that I love to tell is there was this young kid, he was from Kerala, super bright, right? 14 years old at the time of the story. And he was building a ton of different projects. He acquired like tens of thousands of followers on Twitter. He won something called Product Hunt Maker of the Year, which is like, if you're not aware, it's this thing you have to beat up thousands of adults for. A very prestigious thing. And he was doing all of this at 14 or 15 years old, right? His parents, both of them were teachers, one day decided that, like as you see, like abhi padhne ka time nahi hai, matlab ye sab pe dhyan nahi dene ka, like you hear all those dialogues, right, in traditional Indian society. And so unfortunately he was subjected to that reality, as a result of which he wasn't allowed to even pursue these extracurricular things outside of his traditional like JE path or whatever. Thankfully, I think a year after this incident, he was kind of allowed to get back on the path of pursuing whatever interested him. And just yesterday, I actually found out that he was accepted, his startup was accepted into Y Combinator. He's 18 years old, which is just insane, right, for any 18-year-old. So I think the kind of success stories that I've seen come out of Builder Group have really reinforced my belief that, traditional education, while it still has its merits, I think the standard 8 subjects that exist just do not do justice to the kind of capabilities that a lot of these students have and the kind of things that they can end up doing eventually, right? And so, yeah.
Okay. Now you tell me, EdTech, when we talk about EdTech, what is your philosophy behind EdTech? I mean, it's...
Okay. So I'm reminded of this quote from this movie called Coach Carter. And it's this basketball movie. And the coach says to his boys, it's a basketball team, you are all student athletes, you are students first. And when I think of this quote, while it's not directly an apples to apples comparison, I really think that the same philosophy applies when we think about educational technology, right? It's very easy in the AI age when you can do basically anything by like 2 Claude prompts to think, okay, how can we accent our education system with as many possible AI interventions, right? And it's very easy to get caught up in that fad. However, I think that it's futile unless we actually consider the state of education. And this goes back to my argument with the Builder Group as well, and my general conviction in education, which is that if we're not proliferating experiential, dialogic, exploration-oriented learning in classrooms that actually allow students to explore beyond their traditional 8 subjects and really go deep into the most arbitrary of fields, right? Then I think that there's really no point of including technology in the first place if we haven't fundamentally redefined what education means, right? And as Mr. Rahul rightly pointed out in the previous session, like even in higher education in India, like you have all of this rote learning and this very, cut and paste mundane, like, okay, you read this and then you paste it in the paper, like that just doesn't work, right? And I find it fairly, even like today in the AI age, I think the assessment model also needs to be redefined quite starkly. I find it quite ridiculous that you can, with just a couple of prompts, you can complete an assignment and you're not critically thinking about anything that you're doing in that assignment, right? Especially like as a student myself, as someone that goes to school, like I see this happening on day in and day out. So I think we need to really fundamentally define how we assess our students. Like as Sam Altman says, there's this AI voice that exists right now where like people just do not think about what they're writing at all. There's no intentionality and everything is just so, it's just also homogeneous, right? All of the content that you read. So I think we need a model of assessment to be a lot more conversational in schools. And I know that these are some very, very grandiose visions, but I think like it's very possible to kind of introduce this into the education system, slowly, I guess, until we, ultimately reach that ideal system where, learning is primarily through interaction and conversation, and there's a lot of
Would you ask students to steer clear of the, cut and paste prompt kind of learning?
Yes.
Obviously, but how do you integrate then AI into your
That's a good
classroom?
question. Yeah. That's a tough question. I think like this again goes back to kind of redefining how we ask students to use AI, right? If we don't have these kind of opportunities for them to paste in a prompt, copy it, and then submit it as an assignment, and then get graded on their completely unoriginal work, then I think that's one way of addressing the problem. I don't think AI is a bad thing. Like I think
if used as a tool.
Yeah, if used as a tool, then it's a very good thing. So I think just making assessment more conversational and turning teachers in the classroom into kind of facilitators for this conversation-based assessment is very important. I also think potentially teaching prompt engineering in the classroom is it's a little
something that you'd consider teaching.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to teach it, of course, but I think integrating it as part of the curriculum could be quite interesting to see how our youth can interface with these models responsibly and actually use it productively rather than completely replacing their critical thinking.
Okay, now data mining is another term that people throw around a lot these days. How can you integrate that into classrooms to make it slightly interactive?
I'm really glad you asked this question actually. So one of the key projects that I've been working on in education aside from Smart Bharat and Builder Group is something called neurovision. And I'll get into what it is in a second, but I don't know how much this happens in India really, but in a lot of institutions, especially in higher education, they like to kind of use assessment metrics of students to determine how effectively, how effective the pedagogy is of a teacher, right? And I think this creates a very large feedback loop wherein, a teacher teaches something, let's say in like March, and then you have the assessment in June or July, and then you're kind of going based off of the results of student in those assessments to determine how effective the teacher was in her own teaching, right, in his or her own teaching. And this is wrong for 2 reasons. One is because there's just so many different factors that can influence performance in something like an examination. And 2, it doesn't give you the pinpointed insight that you need to figure out where your pedagogy is actually captivating and where it's helping students learn, whereas where it's making their engagement wane, right? So as a kind of antidote to that, in the educational data mining space, something that I've been experimenting with is this tool called Neurovision, as I said, which is this camera module that you can install in classrooms it's this privacy first camera model that you install in classrooms to analyze the aggregate student attention in an ongoing lecture. So like, let's say if this was a lecture hall, for example, and I had a camera set up right here, it would in real time analyze all of your attention spans and deliver aggregate reports to the educator.
That's interesting.
Yeah, while mapping it to the content of the lecture. So we have like a transcription thing running, and it's very easy for them to see after the end of the lecture, okay, in the first 10 minutes, I was speaking this and this and this way, and I was using this and this and this techniques, and that caused a huge peak in the engagement levels of my students, whereas 14 or 15 minutes down the line, it caused a drop. Why did it cause a drop? Now you can like use some kind of generative AI model to analyze the entire transcript and the graph of student engagement and see, okay, what caused my, what pedagogy was captivating. And I think this kind of ties into my general vision right now of just improving the way that we consume knowledge, right, as a society, whether that be in government schools, wherein you're delivering high quality educational content to the students that are traditionally locked out of it using high quality AI dubbing, or at the potentially higher education institutions, or in private schools or in international schools, where you're just improving the quality of teacher-student interactions, right?
Okay. So now you're 18, right?
Yeah,
You
just
started
18,
this
yeah.
journey when you were 17?
Journey for like education as a whole, or?
Yes, education.
I think my specialization in education probably started in the 10th grade, so like 2 or 3 years ago.
Okay.
But it's always been very close to me.
So you've let out, I mean, you've decided to do this mammoth of a task, right? And you're just 18 today. So when you walk into a room full of giants, how do you get them to take you seriously?
That's a good question. I think today, if you're in the right rooms, no matter what your age is, I think people are generally always very willing to support young people that are interested in a specific domain. And I actually want to kind of cite Builder Group here. We were truly one of the first communities that has ever existed that is cross-disciplinary and promotes, young people that are interested in different domains. And I think that really inspired a revolution of, micro grant programs or accelerators or, incubation, incubators for young people specifically. And that's also really caused this kind of mentality shift, in my personal opinion, where if you're in the right spaces, then no matter what your age is, people will tend to take you seriously. And in addition to that, I think, evidence speaks louder than any words can. So instead of, blabbering on for like hours and hours, when I, do meet these influential or these giants, as you said, I kind of just show them the work instead, right? So when they hear this like this completely AI localized output that's, conversing, that's dubbing my voice as someone that doesn't speak any Telugu whatsoever into like perfect Telugu that government school students can comprehend and use to understand a subject as technical as computer education, as locked out as computer education, I think the seriousness starts to develop.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now you tell me, what do you think is the future of EdTech, not just in the state, but in the rest of the country as well? And what are some models that you think we can add that are, presently being practiced that can be replicated elsewhere also?
That's a good question. I think that, again, it just goes back to experiential learning, right? I know like my own school, for example, has been pretty pivotal in giving me the right opportunities that I need to advance my own exploration. Like they have tie-ups with grant programs, for example. They've been able to give me a lot of different opportunities. And I think just kind of seeing this mentality shift where the education, the institutions themselves are encouraging students to pursue things outside of the traditional 8 subjects and really driving them to explore, the most arbitrary of fields. Like, for example, if you, let's say, expose a student to biotechnology one day, then building the right avenues within the classroom for them to fully go into biotechnology. Maybe they like it, maybe they don't like it. High school isn't the place for specialization, but in my very frank opinion, it should be the place where students are given the opportunity to explore frankly, anything and everything that intrigues them, right? And so I think just kind of inculcating this more exploration-based, discovery-oriented learning process in the classroom can be quite beneficial, yeah.
And how do you think we can make this accessible to because not just in Telangana, there are other parts of the country, like I said before, where infrastructure is a very big challenge. How do we make it accessible to the most remote corners of the country?
Absolutely, yeah. So this is actually something I've thought about quite a lot. And in my previous response, by the way, I wasn't referring to rural schools specifically, but I will now. I think India is a country that has one of the highest mobile penetration rates in the world, right? So while traditional programs, what they try to do is, go and install computers in schools and maybe teach for a couple of months, and then unfortunately go on, an indefinite break after that. I think the right approach could instead be to have this kind of communal sharing setup wherein, let's say, even these NGOs that work in proliferating access to computer education, instead of setting up an entire computer lab in a school, maybe you set up 1 or 2 computers in a village, and then you give students and you give learners the opportunity to learn how to use that infrastructure via their mobile phones, right? So then all of this content, for example, that we're developing for Smart Bharat, that is AI localized, you just shove that on a mobile app, you put in, a couple of gamified interactive exercises, and like actual simulations of how the computer would run, for example. You allow them to practice that at their own time, and then, based on some kind of a communal sharing philosophy, they can actually implement it on the computer. It's not ideal, but I think it's a lot more sustainable than, just focusing on a couple of schools and giving them this very half-hearted treatment for a couple of months, right?
Okay, now to end this conversation, one last piece of advice to all the students sitting here, and I mean, what was it that really pushed you to do this, and what would you suggest that they should do to get on and pursue something like this?
So, couple of things. Talk to everybody. You never know what you can find in a conversation, and I think, especially coming to places like this is such a good opportunity to mingle with other people, no matter what their domain is, right? You never know the kind of things that can come out of it. Some of my best ideas have been formed in, conversations that I just would not have expected whatsoever with the most arbitrary of people. So talk to absolutely anyone and everyone. That's number one. And network a lot, because you never know who those people might know that can actually get you to the places that you need to, be fruitful in whatever it is that you're pursuing. For example, this NGO that I worked with for Smart Bharat's initial phases called Nirman, they actually hosted a conclave. It was actually at Radisson, but in the high-tech one. And over there, I had the opportunity to interact with Sri Krishna Aditya Garu, who is the director of Telangana Board of Intermediate Education, who then connected me to the model schools director. And so you never know like who knows who and where you can get to just by talking to people, right? So that's number two. Number three, create your own opportunity. While the education system isn't this ideal utopia wherein you're fully allowed to pursue whatever you want to do and like actually indulge in this exploration based learning, I think you need to try and take any advantage that comes your way. Like for example, I skipped an exam to be here today, so you need to really make that opportunity for yourself is what I would say.
So make the most of the opportunity. Thank you so much, Aaryaman. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Likewise.
And we wish you all the very best.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Aaryaman. A round of applause for Aaryaman, everybody. Kindly stay back. I'd like to invite Mr. Sudhakar Rao, Director ICFI, to kindly come on stage and felicitate Aaryaman. Can we put our hands together, ladies and gentlemen? Thank you, Aaryaman. Thank you, Mr. Sudhakar.